former CIA people or former intelligence office people, you know, as to what may be happening there or what weapons may be used. And most of them are being kind of vague about it too. They're saying things like, well, it may be experimentation gone awry, you know, done by Russia or the Cuban government. Or they're saying, well, we're not really sure what this may be, and it may be some new novel weapon that we don't know about, which is complete BS. This weaponry, the research started in the 50s on it with MK Ultra and MK Surge and other, you know, monikers that we've talked about on your show before. So they know very well what it is and that it's nothing novel, and that every industrialized nation pretty much has access or has developed these types of weapons. So, you know, that part of it, you know, they're just being untruthful in their reporting.
Dr. Hall, got to ask you very quickly, your book, A New Breed of Satellite Terrorism in America, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, is perhaps coming to a movie theater?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a script on it. We have shot a trailer on it and actually are in the process of actually getting it turned into a film. I got kind of pulled into a TV series that I'm actually a part of right now that we're kind of doing the finishing up on the shooting for that. One of the reasons I'm up here in Amish country is actually helping some people pick up some covered wagons and horses and buggies and stuff for the Western. And as soon as that's shot, we're going to be back on getting Targeted done. And I've also been approached by another network to do kind of an A&E style show, question and answer, you know, basically about this. And that is the one good thing about what has happened to these people at the DMC. Not that I don't have sympathies with them being attacked, but now that there are some actual government employees that have been attacked,
it could go mainstream. John, I apologize. I gotta go. Movie.com, newbreedmovie.com. John Hall, thank you so much. When we come back, open lines.
Live from Toronto, Canada, Earth, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Syrett on Zoomer Radio.
Thanks for inviting me into your home. Long haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' basement, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. And a big howdy to all of you listening in on our flagship station, Zoomer Radio, AM 740, 96.7 FM here in Toronto. Hi to all of you listening in on one of our affiliate stations, those of you catching the podcast at iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn.com, and TalkZone.com. Those of you who take the show with you wherever you go on your mobile device with the Conspiracy Show app and the Zoomer Radio app, both, incidentally, free downloads. Those of you watching the live stream on YouTube, and just a reminder, we've set a modest goal of 10,000 subscriptions by the end of 2017. I believe we're closing in on about 5,900, almost at 6,000. So help us out. Please check out the YouTube channel, theconspiracyshow.com, or sorry, The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett, and hit the sub button. Tell your friends and your coworkers. All right. However, and wherever you're listening, I bid thee the warmest of welcomes, and I thank you for your fine company. This door open 0740-416-360, that's the Greater Toronto Area, and toll free from just about anywhere, 1-866-740-4740, 866-740-4740, and also we'll welcome questions and comments from those of you who are in the live chat, YouTube live chat for the YouTube channel. Just a reminder, if you missed the big announcement at the bottom of the hour, we are going back to the old format starting next week. So we'll have longer form interviews. Top of the hour, 11 o'clock Eastern, one interview for the whole hour. And primarily we'll do the same with the second hour, one guest. From time to time, not every week, but from time to time, we'll do some open lines for our weekly remote viewing experiment. The future of that remains, well, it's TBA. We'll let you know. But we heard you loud and clear. Your comments, emails, saying that you're not happy with the new format. So back it goes to the old way, and that's fine. We want to make you happy. All right, let's see. Why don't we dive into the lines here, and we say hello to, let's see, we have Randall. Randall is checking in. I'm not sure, is it Buffalo? Randall, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Richard. It's Randall Montgomery.
Hey, Randall.
Aliens and UFOs.
Hey, great to hear from you again, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I actually have some good news. You know how one of the concerns you have is that the mainstream media seems to always completely ignore everything that you talk about.
Well, or if they do talk about it, they do sort of in a derisive tone. Yeah,
well, the National Post newspaper last week had two articles, one day and the other day. The second one was about the 50th anniversary of the huge UFO sighting at Shag Harbor, and they interviewed Chris Stiles, and it was almost a full-page article.
Interesting.
And it was very, very positive. So that's good news.
Well, it is certainly one of, that's true, it is good news. That's one of the most, perhaps, documented UFO incidents, I mean, in history, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I mean, we have, I think there are RCMP officers on the record having seen something, other local police down in Nova Scotia having seen something.
It's in the Toronto Sun as well.
It was in the Toronto Sun, Albert is saying, as well. All right. Well, that is encouraging. And they didn't do it with sort of tongue firmly planted in cheek.
The tone of it was quite different from the usual. Now, the other thing was the day before, in Barbara Kay's column, and she's an excellent columnist, she had an article about EMPs, electromagnetic pulses.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess a lot of people are talking about that since the rocket man, as President Trump calls him in North Korea, has been sort of threatening to launch sort of a low-altitude nuke, which could cause an EMP event, and that would be lights out North America.
Well, that was the theme of her article. It's an excellent article. If I could just cite the URL in case anybody wants to look it up online like I just did. You just go to nationalpost.com/opinion, Barbara-K. Every word has got a dash in between it. So it's Barbara K. This could destroy our civilization, but we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very true. And she also talks about a book by Toronto Sun columnist and broadcaster Anthony Furey. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct. F-U-R-E-Y. And he just published a book called Pulse Attack, The Real Story Behind the Secret Weapon That Can Destroy North America. So she's giving his book a plug in there. And she also mentions a Peter Fry, who you may have heard of. He was a former staff member of American House Armed Services Committee. And she says he had dedicated the best years of his life to urging action on EMPs. And it was like crying wolf when there really is a wolf and no one believes you.
Right. It's a real head scratcher.
The more vocal he became in pointing out weaknesses in government policies regarding, preventing EMP attacks under Obama, the more his career suffered. And it says he and his wife literally lost the family farm as a result.
It is a head scratcher. My colleague at Coast to Coast AM, George Norrie, of course, has been banging this drum for many years on the urgent need for the federal government in the United States to take measures to harden the grid. The grid. Now, the military, apparently, their grid has been hardened, but not so for the rest of us, so the civilians. And it may not come in the guise of a nuke from North Korea or wherever. It could simply be a coronal mass ejection on par with the Carrington event, which happened back, I guess, in the 1850s. Nobody took notice because we didn't live in an electrified world. So a few telegraph stations got fried, and I believe there were a few injuries, but nobody really noticed. But if that were to happen today, and we've had a couple of near misses in the last several months, a major coronal, mass coronal ejection that were to hit the Earth, and it could be lights out for a very, very long time. Maybe they're listening to the program.
She somehow comes up with the estimate of 33 months. It sounds, I don't know how he could be so exact, but it would be like, say, 3 years being thrown back into the 1800s.
Yes, it would be, indeed, 100%. Well, it sounds like maybe some of those folks over at the National Post are listening to the program, Randall, but thank you for bringing this to our attention.
You're quite welcome.
All right, let's say hi to, is it Cece in Anaheim, California? Hi, Cece.
Hi.
Hi there.
Actually, I was hoping to ask a question of Dr. John Hall, but I must have missed the part where he's no longer on. Is that correct?
That's right. We had him on in the previous hour, but you know what? I'll bring him on for an hour in the next month or two, and we'll talk about it. But what were you going to ask him, Cece?
I know that he approached, or I think it was him that approached Congress. I know that Dr. Robert Duncan did, but I wonder after this Cuban issue, and he indicated that he did speak to some of the victims of the sonic attacks. They're calling them sonic. If any of the senators or congressmen have decided to reach out to him, or maybe Dr. Robert Duncan or anyone regarding these crimes. These are crimes.
Mm-hmm, indeed.
This is horrendous. People who call themselves targeted individuals like myself, this is what they put us through is nothing short of torture.
What's happening with you, Cece? Can you tell us some details?
It's too much. It's too much time for. Really wasn't prepared to talk about myself, except that I will tell you the worst of it. I was systematically maimed during workers' compensation medical procedures, from my skull down to my tailbone. On the last, I had a set of 3 lumbar epidural steroid injections, and each time I kept getting worse. And the second and third time, well, the second time I was told I had to be under anesthesia, which I found out later was not true. I had the right to stay awake. And then the third time, I was literally brutally forced under anesthesia. When I woke up, I had been maimed from my skull down to my tailbone. And then from then on, I was stalked, harassed. I'm followed on the internet. I'm followed on foot. I've had cars come up behind me and flash their lights for miles, not just because they want to get in front of me.
Right.
We're talking harassment for
Right.
miles and miles. I have gone through hell on earth, just like many other targeted individuals. And if it wasn't for the organizations like People Against Covert Torture and Surveillance and Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, I think it was.
Yeah, Dr. Hall is on the
called-
medical. He's on their medical board, actually, of that organization.
Yes, and now he's on the medical board. Dr. John Hall is on the medical board, also with the International Center for Abuse Against Covert Technologies, or that's on www.isaac.org, ICAA.org.
Well, hopefully,
there are
CC.
many of us out there. We're not alone. We give each other, I haven't met anyone except for Derek Robinson in person.
Right.
And a few other TIs. But I now live in chronic pain because, by the way, when I said that they maimed my
CC,
back,
I apologize. I have to run.
Oh, absolutely.
We're
See, I
going
knew
into
it
a
was going
break.
to be too long. It's going to be
That's
too much.
okay. CC, listen, I'm going to get Dr. Hall on for a longer period of time, and hopefully you'll call back and he can offer some suggestions for you. Hang in there. I know that's easy for me to say. We'll be praying for you. CC.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate the time. Have
All
a
right.
great day.
Bye-bye. Lines continues on the other side. Don't go away.
Shaking the world and seeing what falls. This is The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio.
Hi, I'm
stuff happens.
set you free. But first, it will really tick you off. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Just a reminder, bottom of the hour, Will Hart joins us. Ancient alien ancestors, advanced technologies that transformed our world. Right now we are enjoying our open line segment. Before we go back to the calls, let me go over to you, Ryan. And what do we have from our live chat on YouTube?
We have a good local question from You Betcha. Sales legalization next year. What do you think about the LCBO taking charge of those sales?
Well, I'm not a big fan of sort of government agencies or government-owned entities taking charge of much. I'm of two minds on legalizing pot. Certainly, medical marijuana, I'm fully in favor of. I don't think we've fully explored, the medical benefits of marijuana. We had recently a comedian on the program last week who believes that marijuana or cannabis oil taken in a suppository basically cured him of stage 4 prostate cancer twice. Now, that's his claim. I'm not making that claim. He genuinely believes that is the case. So I'm all in favor of medical marijuana. I'm not a big fan of legalizing pot, but on the other hand, I hate to see lives of young people destroyed because of a simple possession that may prevent them, for example, from crossing over the border into the United States. Do we really want to condemn, a generation of people with a criminal record that will haunt them for the rest of their lives? So that to me is problematic. The idea that people are rotting in prison still in the United States for possession of a couple of seeds or a couple of plants, to me, is an incredible injustice. It doesn't serve society. But I'm not necessarily a big fan of the LCBO being the sort of the venue by which people will obtain their marijuana. Obviously, it's intended to be a cash grab. If you want to legalize it and you want people to have the freedom, then you would allow them to grow their own pot. That's not what they want, though. Obviously, they want the tax revenue. So it's very cynical in order, for them to do that, I think. And what was the second question?
Another one. Well, did you do anything? The world was supposed to end yesterday. Did your family prepare at all?
September the 23rd, there's a Christian numerologist, David Mead, he was on Coast to Coast and so forth, and said that, yes, here we go again. And I believe it was somehow connected with Nibiru and Planet X. Did I do anything to prepare for the end of the world? Yes, I went out and I bought some really green bananas. The greenest bananas that I could find, because I don't give these end of the world prophecies any time at all, quite frankly. All right, let's go. But thank you for that, Ryan. Let's go back to the phones and let's say hello to Sasha is in Vancouver. Hello, Sasha.
Hi, Richard.
Hi there.
So I'm just calling in. I wanted to ask you a little bit about it seems to me that there is increasing polarization between the people who have a kind of like a zealous blind faith in whatever standard science says is true. And they kind of ignore and ridicule any anomalous events or anomalous observations. And then on the other side, there are the people who want to kind of scientifically investigate for themselves the things that we're told are silly to even question. And so what I wanted to ask you is, how do you think we can better fight against that? Because I just see it leading to kind of zealous behavior and extremism on both sides.
Can you give me an example of what you're talking about, Sasha, in terms of the scientific community? Is there a particular issue, the way that the science views it, that you think illustrates your point?
Well, for example, particle colliders, let's say, are taxpayer funded, right? If you look at CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, there are some in the States as well. And they're funded to the tune of billions of dollars over decades. And they're all predicated on the concept of particle physics and the space-time as a fabric. And there are more and more physicists who are daring, I guess, to kind of speak out and say, well, actually, particle physics, that's kind of an older model that's being replaced by these ideas of particles just being different levels of excitation in an underlying field. But no one's listening to them because we've invested billions of dollars into these particle colliders, and because all these scientists have their careers invested in this.
Right.
And so science is becoming a religion where you just have to have blind faith. You can't replicate the experiment. So when a scientist says, oh, this particle is smashing into that one, and then these are the sub-particles that are created, you can't test that. You can't verify that for yourself as a citizen. So all you can do is accept it on blind faith. Oh, yes, okay, that's true. And so in that way, science has become a religion, and you can't question it in any way.
I would agree, which is the irony is that that's antithetical to the scientific method. So when someone says to you, the science is in, there are some cases perhaps where you can safely say that after thousands of years and repeating something over and over, and you get the same result. But when someone says to you, the science is in, that's always a good clue to turn on your heels and run quickly in the opposite direction, as far as I'm concerned. Because again, say the science is in, the science is never in. We're constantly collecting data and analyzing and testing hypotheses and so forth. Now, how does that change? Well, it's true that science has become deeply politicized. You mentioned, vested interests, tenure, for example, in universities, and funding is often tied to a particular dogma. And so if you challenge that orthodoxy, then you're up against, this sort of almost monolithic machine. It's very difficult to do. But if you look, I think, at the arc of human scientific development, eventually those dogmas are challenged. Maybe it's very slow at first. It takes a long time. And what I guess one of the major impediments are, those that are guarding that orthodoxy, they have to be completely sort of brutal about it. They have to die. They have to die away. And they need to be replaced by, the Copernicus, who is challenging that. And at first, the biggest jumps in scientific development always come from people who are labeled heretics originally or initially. There's an old saying, even the mightiest oak starts off as a nut. And just that seems to me to be the way that science progresses. It takes sometimes a lot longer than it should. When you consider, for example, the propeller. The propeller was, I believe it was one of the ancient Greeks, trying to think of his name now, that developed the propeller. But we didn't do anything really with the propeller. We had steam technology. We knew about steam at the time of the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
But we didn't have material science in order to know, well, people were afraid of steam. How thick does the metal have to be to prevent, an explosion and so forth. So years for us to do anything with steam power. That just seems to be the way it is. And I don't know, that maybe that's human nature. I don't know that there's any way around it. But eventually the truth wins out as water rises above oil.
But
oil above water, rather, I should say.
I'd like to challenge people to start, I guess, investigating things for themselves, to accept less on blind faith, to make, I think YouTube is a wonderful means of taking science back from the hands of this kind of religious institution that it's become, and making it something that citizens participate in, right? Like I make videos that challenge the globe model of Earth, and just to show people just how much they take on faith, just how much they accept without understanding the details. And I think, to me, it seems to me that rather than wait 50 years for this batch of scientists with their dogma to die off and hope that the next batch is somehow closer to the truth, I kind of think that it's our responsibility as citizens to start challenging the dogma and speaking out. And I think YouTube is a great way of doing that.
Yes, you know, that process that I just talked about that can take generations upon generations, I mean, that may be quickened somewhat by the internet, and never before have we had the world literally at our fingertips. And this is a clarion call for more people to get involved in science and start asking the fundamental questions. And, well, why do we believe this? And you know, and testing these things out for themselves. It's a great idea, Sasha, and I appreciate your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Do we have time for one more? Can we talk to, is it Edelasi in Mississauga? Is it Edelasi? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Edelasi in Mississauga, someone who's hearing weird sounds. Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Let's say hello to Melanie in Toronto.
Hi,
good evening.
Morning.
Good morning,
I
Melanie.
caught the tail end of your interview. Did they not have a sound canyon, I believe, during the G20 protests in Toronto, where they were going to use
Yes.
it, they were stopped? But
Yes.
I'll tell you something, our governments in North America and the Western world, they're looking for the enemy to be on the outside, which is true, it's there. But the worst kind of enemy that you can have throughout history, we've learned, is the one on the inside. And we have institutions that are corrupt, who only are there to protect themselves and not the people they were set up to protect. That is a cancer in this country. And we have that in every institution, whether it's policing, government, the RCMP, the local police, the teachers union, medical professions who are the medical professionals who are guilty of malpractice. They're set up, and if people realize that these institutions are not protecting us, they're protecting the institution themselves. They don't even protect the members of the institution, as we saw with police officers who suffered depression, who have committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically told to hide and not to come to the forefront. So I think we should start looking inward as to the enemy on the inside. And as the Bible says, my people perished for lack of good and godly leadership. I mean, our governments have absolutely fallen to pieces. They're giving into every vice. They're giving into every insanity. And you know what? It's not the what is the electromagnetic pulses that are going to destroy us. It's our lack of morality. It's our lack of accountability. So this is where people have to look. It's that seed of cancer of lack of accountability from our institutions. That's my opinion on the way life is going. And listen, you know, the Bible says we do not know when the end is to come, and we should not speculate on that.
Exactly.
Most people are too busy trying to make a living, feed their families. So, but your show is wonderful. It opens up our imagination.
All right, Melanie, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. All right. Do we have one more from our live chat room in YouTube? Ryan.
Yeah, we have a pretty good one from Andrew here. He wants to know if some of Tesla's technology or something could maybe cause earthquakes. Have there been any sort of strange or unnatural earthquakes in the past?
I wouldn't know about whether Tesla had, you know, that we hear about this this death ray that he had, and some people believe that may have been behind, when was it, about 1908, this huge explosion in Siberia that just leveled trees, you know, for square miles. It was an incredible blast. Seems to me now they have pretty well determined that was a meteorite, as far as I know. But I know that for some time people sort of pointed to Tesla's death ray. I've also heard, and Albert was mentioning this to me earlier. In fact, Nelson Thal has talked to me about, you know, the placing a small nuclear device in the tectonic plates can cause, who knows, you know, what they're capable of these days. Mexico City, that earthquake wasn't centered in Mexico City, but that area, they call those subduction zones. They are just, they're not in a great spot. I mean, the underneath places like Mexico City, there's a lot of silt, ancient oceans and so forth, and it just turns to liquid. It's just it's just rife for this type of seismic activity. And of course, we had the huge earthquake in Mexico. Again, wasn't centered in Mexico City. It was hundreds of miles away. But because of the silt, it just spreads underground. And of course, Mexico City has something like 20 million people. But back in '85, I think there was 5,000 killed. From time to time, you hear about earthquakes that are happening in places they shouldn't happen. Oklahoma, for example. We're having using water under high pressure could be causing some of this. Who knows? Not my area, but we'll get someone on to talk about it. All right, when we come back, Will Hart, Ancient Alien Ancestors, Advanced Technologies That Transformed Our World.
Don't be afraid of the dark. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio. To talk to Richard, call 416-360-0740 or toll free 1-866-740-4740. Show with Richard Serrett from Zoomer Radio.
All right, welcome back. We are trying to connect with Will Hart, photojournalist and writer who's been investigating UFOs and history's mysteries since 1968. He is the author of Ancient Alien Ancestors, Advanced Technologies That Transformed Our World, and we're all set to discuss whether or not life was intentionally seeded on Earth by extraterrestrials in the distant past, and was the Earth terraformed through an engineering program so sophisticated and vast that it has even escaped our attention. And do we have Will? We do. Excellent news. Writer, photojournalist Will Hart is with us. Will, thanks for joining us. You're in Mexico tonight, I understand.
Well, thank you. And yes, I am. I'm down in Mexico, just across the border, not very far down. So I'm not in the earthquake area.
All right.
But yes, I am in Mexico.
When here's a term that I admittedly was not familiar with, and that is directed panspermia. Directed panspermia. What does that mean exactly, Will?
Well, basically, panspermia, let's just start with that one real quick. Panspermia is just the concept that the seeds of life are out there everywhere in the cosmos and getting transported around in various ways on cosmic objects, comets, what have you. Directed panspermia, that has actually been around since.
You're cutting in and out. Can you hear me, Will? Did we lose Will? We did. He's dropped off. All right, we'll try to get him back. In the meantime, why don't we go back to our live chat? And do we have any more questions there, Ryan White, while we're waiting for Will Hart to join us? It sounds like that phone line is a little shaky down there in Mexico.
Yeah, no, we had some question from Ian. He wants to know about alternative energy and why is it so slow in coming?
Because the economic system that we have and that we all benefit from is tied to the petrodollar. And, you know, there are a lot of alternatives that have been tried, but nothing packs the energy efficiency of good old fossil fuel. Now, to me, the bigger question is, you know, why do we not have far more fuel efficient vehicles? I've done a number of programs, including one with a late inventor who, this was an idea that's been around since the 1930s. It was a carburetor that was created so that you could get 100 miles per gallon. And a number of people have talked about this and written about this, and a number of people who did so actually ended up 6 feet under, or they disappeared mysteriously. So the question is as to why it takes so long, because we all have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are. When they talk about disruptive technology, it's not just disruptive to the oil company, it's really disruptive to all of us. So we all have to sort of, I guess, appreciate or understand we all have a vested interest in it. It's not just the oil companies. It would be very disruptive for us just to, to suddenly do away with an internal combustion engine. Think about how many jobs are dependent on that, and our way of life is dependent on that. I believe that oil, fossil fuels will be with us for another 20, 30 years anyway. I know a lot of car companies are talking about by 2034, that's it. Is it Volvo? I think by 2034, that's it. They're not going to produce any more internal combustion engines. We shall see. We shall see. All right, I think we have Will Hart back. Will, are you there?
Yes, I am here. To pick up, directed panspermia is actually a theory. The next step up from panspermia, as it suggests, intentional transmission of seeds or transplanting seeds by an advanced race to the Earth, to other planets, but to the Earth. And it was proposed by Sir Francis Crick, who was a co-discoverer of the DNA, the shape of the DNA molecule back in the 50s. He came up, along with Leslie Orville, a biochemist, who was the father of the RNA world.
Right.
So we're talking about two eminent scientists here who came up and proposed this back in the early 70s. But there wasn't a lot of the space program support that we do now. So they were proposing this theory, and they didn't have a lot of support right then, but they were both experts in DNA. So they took apart Darwin's theory, because basically, in science, you've got to, in order to come up with a new idea, people have to be convinced, well, why? Why do we need a new theory? Darwin's theory, and showed why it didn't work. And then proposed this, that an advanced race had seeded the Earth, of course, a very long time ago. And here we are.
And I mean, obviously, we don't have time to get into Crick and Orville's theory of directed panspermia in great detail, but why couldn't it have just happened accidentally, where microbial matter landed here via a meteorite or a comet?
Well, they didn't think that it was. Yeah, it could. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They basically are argued that it didn't seem strong enough, that there needed to be like a directing force there, that things just, just flying around randomly. They thought it was that what was sent here was too far advanced. And if you look at, the intelligence theory, their ideas are basically what spawned that. They came up with the argument that you have organisms here, the first ones that are found are too advanced already for some kind of evolution to have taken place on the planet. They're just like little tiny machines almost.
Right, and there are leaps in the development of certain species and that are not seem to be reflected in the fossil record. So it's almost as if something got kick-started. We'll take a time out and come back. Will Hart is with us. Ancient alien ancestors, advanced technologies that transformed our world. Stay with us.
When you look at the Conspiracy Show with Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio. To speak with Richard live, call 416-360-0740 or toll free at 1-866-740-4740. With Richard Sarrett from Zoomer Radio.
Welcome back. Will Hart is with us. Ancient alien ancestors, advanced technologies that transformed our world. This is sort of the second chapter. The first one would be Genesis Race. Will, we were talking about, somehow microbial matter or more sophisticated organisms were intentionally seeded here on planet Earth in the distant past by an extraterrestrial race. I wanted to ask you, the second chapter of the book, you talk about Enrico Fermi and, of course, the Fermi paradox, where he says, we have something like, is it 80 billion galaxies in the observable universe, and probably more suns than there are grains of sand on all the beaches in the world. Given the size and the age and so forth of the universe, somebody out there should have developed interstellar travel by now. But Fermi's point was, well, so where are they? And you say, well, there's a fly in the ointment, in Fermi's ointment. Explain.
Well, to me, yes, Fermi was, an eminent physicist, but he neglected to put all the data into that formula that he came up with. Because scientists at that time, except for Carl Sagan, an astronomer, just ignored archaeology, just ignored the type of evidence that I'm sorry, somebody's here right now. Anyway, he did not take into consideration all of the enigmatic archaeological evidence, the cultural evidence, and I'm talking about, the Bible, the Sumerian text, the Enuma Elish, the Dogon, their oral traditions, which were all saying that, look, some other race, some alien race, the gods came and visited us. They brought us these technologies. We didn't create any of this.
Well, you mentioned ancient Egypt, which is kind of it's fascinating that, as you point out, you have one of the great ancient civilizations, lasted something like 3,000 years, and yet if you look at ancient Egypt, they didn't have any major urban centers, as you point out. They didn't have an understanding of civil engineering, and yet they constructed these amazing.
They didn't construct them.
Yes, that was my
that's
next
the
point.
That's the big issue, and that's where, you know, the name of your show. That's where you start having to think about conspiracy, because you're looking at a 48-story tall, precision engineered structure. It had to be precision engineered because the base had to be just as flat as an iron frying pan, you know, because to stack 204 rows with millions of blocks of stone so that it goes up and it doesn't become all, you know, discombobulated along the way.
Right.
You have to have precision engineering on a massive scale. And that, what I don't understand is, engineers don't talk about it. Very, very few, and only in recent years have a few stuck their noses out there. There seems to be such a fear of being ridiculed, of being held up in the public as, you know, wearing a tinfoil hat, that these engineers who know better, anybody can look at that structure and go, wait a minute, don't tell me people built that with stone tools and then carried those blocks by the millions. This is the silliest proposal imaginable, and yet people have been brainwashed, literally brainwashed into believing it. And you have stones in there that are 70 tons. Nobody lifted a 70-ton stone up, and they didn't get it up 150 vertical feet into the king's chamber, completely flat, completely, you know, squeezed together so you can't put a credit card between the stones. And yet people have been given to accept that by this academic establishment, and it's not in one place, it is global. So if you want to talk a conspiracy, do they need to stand up, you know, and talk to each other? No. Conspiracies don't work that way. People are a lot more subtle than that, especially educated people. Well, you know, all they have to do is write, you know, a few little things, and everybody gets a signal. Hey, we don't touch this. We're not going to talk about these elongated skulls. We're not going to talk about any of these enigmas that are out there. We just ignore them.
Talk to me about how the Great Pyramids of Giza are representative of the three inner planets.
Well, even if you look at them, you stand back and go, wait a minute, why are they such hugely different sizes? Well, two of them are pretty close, which the Earth and Venus are. I did the math. If you read it, we can't go into all the math because that kind of boggles people's minds if they listen to it on the radio. But it breaks down to where it represents the Earth. The second pyramid, Venus, they're about the same ratio. I put all the math in there. And then the third pyramid, Mercury. I'm not saying that negates or competes with the theory of Orion. The pyramid builders didn't work that way. They worked on so many different levels that the pyramid is many, many different things, including being the GPS anchor for longitude. So it's many different things. Mm-hmm. And I don't dispute Chris Dunn's power plant theory.
Yes,
it's just a lot more complex, and we like to think linear, and we like to think either or. It's a lot more complex than that, and you have to keep your mind wide open.
One of the fascinating aspects that you raise in the book is the idea that Earth was terraformed. We often hear about, you know, if we're going to colonize Mars, we need to create an atmosphere. We need to melt the polar ice on Mars and release carbon dioxide and create an atmosphere. You're saying that there's evidence that the Earth was terraformed and engineered, terraformed. Give us a few for instances.
Well, what I present what triggered that in me was partly because we're doing it. In my first book, The Genesis Race, I suggested that we're recapitulating. We have it in our DNA to do exactly what the advanced race, the bioengineered us to do. They go around extending life, bringing life to other planets, kickstarting civilization. We're only 50 years into these things, and we're on one generation into space travel, DNA. DNA has been proven it's not that difficult to manipulate DNA. We're way ahead in that. We're finding out that space travel is the hard problem. It's difficult. And I think a lot of people, not just alternative people, but our scientists are already scratching their heads going, I don't think we can do it the hardware way we're trying to. We're going to have to go some kind of portal, a wormhole, some other way of doing it. And we got quite a ways to go on that. And I think that's what the aliens did. Because it's very difficult to solve the problem of these vast distances between the planets. Anyway, let's get back to your point.
Right, terraforming, yes.
If we're already doing it this quickly, we're already thinking of how to do it. I think you get what I'm implying here, that it's in us. It's just in us. We're doing these things and very fast going, okay, where's all this going? What's our real mission here? What's our purpose? And it just comes to terraform. We could extend life to Mars or other planets, just like you said. And that's what I say was done here. And I say the proof is the 30 North Meridian and the position of the Great Pyramid on that longitude. The longitude, the prime meridian, should not be over at Greenwich. There was no reason to put Greenwich as the prime meridian. No scientific reason. They just did it because at that time Great Britain had the political power in the world. It was only done like 300 years ago. But the pyramid shows you exactly what the planet's geometry is. The Nile and the Mississippi Delta are exactly 120 degrees apart. It doesn't matter what system of reckoning you use. But if you make the pyramid, then you see it. Pyramid's at 0. You see it's 120 degrees from the pyramid. On the other side, the Yangtze Delta is exactly 90 degrees. You put it in Greenwich, it makes it look like there isn't that geometry. The geometry's there. And then you have the longest river in the world. I mean, if you see these things from satellite, you see, the Nile is 6,000 miles long. It's running north-south, and there the pyramid sits right on 30 North. And then you go from there, and you actually see that you get to the Mississippi, and the mound builders were to the north, with the Mississippi flowing from north to south, the Nile going the other direction. They're like inverted mirror images of each other.
Yeah, it's too precise, too neat and tidy. What about the idea? I don't believe you broached this in the book, but I've interviewed co-authors who wrote a book about. It was called "Who Built the Moon?" The idea that the moon is one of the most mysterious objects in the observable universe, and the idea that it's almost too perfect. The distance from the Earth, that life would not be possible if the moon wasn't exactly in the place that it is, the size that it is. Do you think that there's any credence to that part of this terraforming may have been that the
moon could have been towed into place?
Yes.
It is a very odd object in our solar system because it's very big compared to other moons. The ratio of the moons to their parent bodies, our moon is much bigger than the other moons are relative to the planets. And yeah, I agree with them that there's a lot of anomalies about it. It's just the exact right size because it's to cover the sun in an eclipse, because it's the distance, so that it just covers, I think we're talking 400 times.
It's actually 365, which is the days in the year. Yeah,
we have all these very precise things going on for life to be. Everything has to be just right, and it is just right. So you have to then infer there's got to be an intelligence I mean, it's not the kind of intelligence we can really think of or imagine, because it's to even to conceive of the planet possibly having been terraformed. Because what I'm saying is you have to think of, if these rivers are all flowing into this 30-degree north around the entire planet and then coming out at deltas and flowing into the seas, why did the landmass, why did this all intersect around this one band on the planet? What makes it so special? Well, then, you start getting into a level of geology where nobody's asking those kind of questions.
Right, right.
Our scientists don't seem, at this point, to really want things to be orderly and organized. They seem to want to explain everything in terms of, let's go back through a series of accidents to the Big Bang.
Right, random. That's
where
right.
Nothing came, and just all these things were just there, and they went kaboom, and then here we are. Through a bunch of accidents, and then you throw Darwinism in there, which is an accident too. I just don't buy that at all. Everything I look at is organized and orderly. I'm looking at nature. I'm looking at rivers. I'm looking at the palm of my hand. I'm seeing veins. I'm seeing things that are organized.
100%. It all speaks to a great architect. Who that architect was it an ancient race of advanced extraterrestrials? Was it Almighty God? That's always food for thought. And we appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll have you back on when we have more time. Ancient alien ancestors, advanced technologies that transformed our world. My thanks to Ian, Albert, Ryan. Back next week, back to the old format. Hope you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light, what I say in a whisper. Proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.
You're listening.